First, thank you for inviting me today. I'm following in the footsteps of many wonderful presenters. I think the topics here kind of cover all bases, interest level individually by the presenters. Had me really re-questioning some of my perspectives on topics that I'm pretty familiar with, so I think a round of applause for everybody. We can say that for the end, or not. No worries. So this presentation is kind of how I really would like to be somebody that helps kind of reconfigure the curriculum in the state of New Jersey when it comes to teaching the 18th century and the Revolutionary War. So this presentation is mostly ideas, some that I have actually implemented in the classroom. I had 4 years of experience, 6th through 8th grade special ed, but I also had experience in my tenure of writing curriculum for the 8th grade social studies unit, which does cover the Revolutionary War. But that being said, because a lot of the topics today did touch on some of the stuff in my presentation, I will try to be not so redundant if it comes up and kind of breeze through some things that we did touch on. But that being said, let me get started. All right. Consider this. What divides the state of New Jersey? Personality, really. But we really divide it by sports teams, 2 major cities, Taylor ham, pork roll, water. We're a small state with a lot of attitude and opinions. And as you can see here, we're all pretty familiar with that divide. And as one of our previous speakers here touches on the historical roots, this area prior to European colonization, the Lenape themselves actually subdivided what is now the state of New Jersey, even amongst their own cultures. So New Jersey was divided for thousands of years before modern Europeans even arrived, which I think is pretty astounding, and I think it speaks to probably something in the water around here that keeps us divided and territorially, maybe at each other's throats more than we like to admit. But okay. So how can we make these connections with students? Well, as I said, this brief presentation today summarizes what I believe to be an opportunity for teachers, professors, and educators in New Jersey to reimagine and redesign our early history curriculum. While some of us had local history classes in our youth, many of us did not. And based on today, from what I'm hearing, when it comes to high school level, most high school students today are lucky to get any type of localized history, especially when it comes to the Revolution. So the state continues to undersell the importance of its own history, and the importance starts with students learning it, of course. So what are the Jerseys? Well, I think most people in this room know East and West. Today we roughly refer to them rather as North and South Jersey. But obviously, historically, this is the home of the Lenni Lenape, as we just heard in a great presentation. And New Jersey, even from its get-go, was divided regionally between the North and South Pole of New York and Philadelphia. New Jersey to this day does not have a major city amongst its borders. If you're a comic book fan, Gotham City actually is in New Jersey, so there's the exception. But regarding the divide between North and South, you have these 2 major spheres of influence, and that breaks down culturally amongst religious affiliations throughout the 18th century, how the economy develops, how investments in land develop throughout the colonists themselves, participation in the 7 Years' War, or lack of thereof, and including going into the 1760s and the protest movement. Why were citizens in New Jersey along the coast far more invested in the protest movements? We know probably because of the ports and the trade embargoes. But New Jersey itself was largely absent when it comes to all of the protest movements that really inspired the start of the American Revolution. So by the time we get to the Revolutionary War, New Jersey's kind of indifferent in the beginning. It doesn't really affect us too much. We don't really have much say in it. You know, this is a Boston problem. Virginia's getting involved for various interests, but New Jersey's, we're not really tied to what's really driving this revolution. It's not until the radical factions take over in 75 and mostly in the spring of 76. And we have here William Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's bastard son, the last rural governor of New Jersey, and of course William Livingston, who we've met today several times. Students, in my opinion, should really learn about this pull of tension from the outset of the revolution in the state of New Jersey. Also, they should also be really giving a deep dive into what the state constitution of 76 did and what it did not do. Now, I think we all know that the state constitution is probably most celebrated for being ratified and adopted 2 days before the Declaration of Independence. So that in itself is worthy of note. But the state, or this constitution itself, does set the state up for a type of government that, while in itself is revolutionary, it leaves a lot to be interpreted. And one interpretation we're going to get to in a slide coming up involves women. Patriots versus Loyalists, and is it a civil war? Now, the people in South Carolina love to always give us a hard time saying, New Jersey loves to claim you guys had more battles than anybody, but we really did. We really have you beat. We also like to claim there was a civil war in the state of New Jersey during the Revolution, which there was, okay? The war really divided everybody, especially by 1781, 1782, after Yorktown, when the peace treaty is trying to be hammered out overseas. At this point, civilians are literally fighting tooth and nail amongst neighbors over property, over grievances. So the war does tear the state apart. And after the war in the 1780s, the state has to try to find a way to put itself back together, which I think is a very undertaught aspect of the post-Revolutionary War story. Failures of the militia. It's not just George Washington who had a problem with the militia. William Livingston did as well, along with many other leadership within New Jersey and outside of New Jersey. The militia, while New Jersey did fight, we sent troops to Long Island in 76. We were in much of the New York campaign before retreating, and of course taking place in the historic battles at Trenton and Princeton. New Jersey militia did not really, they weren't very impressive. They really didn't turn out for long stretches of time, and at this point, when their short enlistments were over, they all went home. And they really had to be coaxed into coming back. And of course, with what? With currency that was basically worthless. So that in itself is an undertold story. So I feel we need to focus more on the military aspect when it comes to what inspired not only these soldiers to keep coming back, but what did it take to inspire them to come back? And of course, with anything involving the 18th century in American history, slavery is obviously front and center, as it should be. New Jersey, going back to the division of East and West, one aspect of New Jersey history that I feel always gets kind of undersold is, was slavery just uniform, the same in the state of New Jersey, or was it different? Well, it was actually different between East and West. And I'm not just talking about the Quaker influence and the Anglican influences in East Jersey, but also just the type of the economy that reinforced the slave trade in New Jersey itself. As we know, between 1710 and 1750, a lot of the immigrants from, or rather to North Jersey, East Jersey, came from the Caribbean. I'm talking about white settlers. And with them, they brought their version of Caribbean slavery with them. And this is why in Monmouth County and elsewhere in northern parts of the state of New Jersey, that version of slavery mimicked the Caribbean version of slavery. Whereas West Jersey, which was more influenced by Quakers, as we know, it had a different version. It was more of a domesticated version. I'm not saying one was better than the other. I'm just pointing out that there were differences, subtle, but they did exist. So how can we express that, and how can we teach that in a way that really breaks that apart and dives deeper into what did it mean for these individuals who were enslaved, obviously, and what did it mean for the greater picture of what slavery was in the 18th century? Oh, you weren't supposed to see that yet. My question at the bottom. So why was New Jersey the Crossroads? Does anybody know? The big red line. Saw my slide.
Distance from one part of the state to the other, especially if you're in the lowest, from Katy County all the way up to the upper parts of North Jersey, that is within close proximity to the Hudson Valley.
Close, but no cigar. Literally called the Crossroads because we actually had the best laid out road system in the entire North American colonies at the time. The road system that went from New York roughly to Trenton, New Jersey, was the best and most traversed road in all of the colonies. Take that, Massachusetts. So we literally get the name Crossroads Revolution, not from battles and the amount of time George Washington slept here or didn't sleep here, but literally from the road systems, which I think says it all. So, all right. So today I'm focusing on West Jersey, South Jersey. No offense, North Jersey. I'm sick of hearing about you. It's just too much. Just go back to your Knicks. Yeah, it's fine. So I'm focusing on South Jersey today. And here we have just a slew of battles that took place in South Jersey. And I didn't even put Trenton and Princeton up there, even though technically it was Burlington County at the time, but So for educators in the room, to say that we don't have battle sites, we don't have places to go and take our students, you're wrong. Here we go right here. They are within an hour's drive for all of us. And some on the side here, have anybody not know any of these or not familiar with any of these? Everybody's saying, I'm familiar with all of them. Great. And the best part about including these battles is you can touch on every major campaign that came through this area throughout the Revolution. Okay? So everything from 1776 and all the December events, that's the lead up to Trenton, Princeton that took place in Burlington County. Everything from 1777 on there is the Philadelphia campaign and along the rivers there. Battle of Red Bank, Jen's back here. Battle of Red Bank, the only American victory in the entire Philadelphia campaign. Thank you very much. And 1778, we still have more fighting. And of course, the British retreat through Burlington County on the way to Monmouth. The American soldiers make life hell for the British Army for that week marching through the state. And on each individual day, we have dozens and dozens and dozens of journals from soldiers on that march describing the misery that they were going through. Primary sources for everybody to go through. They're at our fingertips, ladies and gentlemen. On the right, or rather on the left, we have the battle sites. On the right, just a few places of interest, not even all the places of interest. So we have Batstow on there. We have Greenwich. We have Indian Mills. We have Tom's River. Everything in between. So these are houses. These are sites that did not have battles but are affiliated with people or campaigns themselves. So again, we have a plentiful array of sites and places to take students at field trips, and also just places to study virtually if need be. So, taking a quick break from New Jersey to talk about this guy real quick. Anybody know who that guy is? I heard somebody say, thank God. Mr. George Washington. I say make it relatable. The one thing I learned in my brief tenure in the classroom is you can talk about all this stuff, you can talk about it until you're passionate in the face, and the kids are going to look at you and you're going to be like, yeah, okay. And they're going to walk out of there. And it really is amazing what they retain at the end of the day. Now for me, I always used to say to the students, it's not my job to teach you whether to like or to dislike George Washington. That's not my job. That's for you at the end of the day. I could care less. But if I've done my job, you should have at least taken away something of importance to understand why he's worth knowing. For me, at the end of the day, I think his resignation at the end of the war from the Army is number one in American history. He sets the standard. We're not a monarchy rather. So that's my personal opinion. But regardless. So I would teach all this about leadership and about Washington and all this and that. What was the one takeaway? The students always would come up to me at the end. Mr. Z, he's a redhead. That's what you took away from this whole lesson? I didn't know he was a redhead. Don't know what these kids are going to take away at the end of the day. But they were paying attention because I did mention he was a redhead. So another thing I learned about teaching George Washington is, again, making it relatable. George Washington lost his father at the age of 11. His half-brother, Lawrence, became his father figure for the next 10 years of his life until he died. Then Washington, who does not have any biological children of his own, becomes a surrogate father to Martha Washington's children through her first marriage. Jackie Custis dies right after Yorktown from illness. His children, Washington then becomes surrogate grandfather to. On the right there, George Washington Parke Custis, who as a boy is in that painting, and as an older man in the picture down there, he becomes father-in-law to Robert E. Lee through his daughter's marriage to Lee later. Washington writes many letters in the 1790s about how he cannot inspire this young boy to get into the books, get his head together, and basically calls him an idiot. So he's even struggling being a father to raising this kid. And of course, we have Mr. Lafayette up there, who Washington adopts as a surrogate father, or a surrogate son rather, and Lafayette himself did not have a father. His father died when he was an infant. So I learned in real time teaching this lesson about father figures, and also about how back then families, interchanged all the time because of deaths. People died obviously from illness at a very young age and remarried. So I was able to relate it to people getting divorced today. And obviously we know divorce rates today are very much higher in society than they were even 50 years ago. It's far more common. And making it relatable in that sense, I noticed something. Students were far more in tune to the conversation. They were able to relate to it. They had questions. Whereas before, when I was not using the father aspect here, they would just tune right out and be like, great, George Washington, he had white hair and he owned slaves. And I think he was president too. So it's trying to tackle these, interesting but also complicated people in new ways that make them relatable to students. And at the end of the day, don't be concerned if you don't get everything you think that, in George Washington's case, obviously there's so much to talk about. Don't be concerned if you forget something or leave something out. Just make it relatable. The kids will come back to it on their own terms if they are interested. All right. So, locating materials. As a professional historian, I spend most of my time looking through primary source materials. I am a certified nerd, in case anybody was concerned that they are the only nerds here today. So, we're all in good company. It took my eyes 5 years of reading 18th century handwriting to get used to that, so it's not easy, I know, but reading primary sources and locating primary sources I know takes time, and I know for professional educators, time is something you normally don't have a lot of. So I also say this today, this is where someone like myself hopefully can be a use to you, that I'm putting myself out there where this is what I do professionally. I spend time finding materials like this, making them available to you. That way you can just plug them right into the classroom. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. Okay? So with that, I apologize, this keeps going in and out. So with that in mind, this is a story near and dear to my heart. I'm a local of Mount Holly, Burlington County. And in 1776, we had our own little battle that took place right before the Battle of Trenton. And it involves the Hessians, it involves the American militia, it involves some British soldiers, but it also involves a woman. Does anybody know the story of the widow of Mount Holly? One hand, and I know that hand. Shame on all of you in this room. So, a quick story. We know about the Hessians in Trenton and George Washington, doing his Captain Morgan thing on the boat and takes Trenton and whatnot. 2 days before, or rather a few days before the Battle of Trenton, there's actually more Hessians in Burlington County and Trenton at the time. and they're spread out all over the county in garrisons, and they have their eye on the prize, which is Philadelphia. They're just waiting for the weather to clear to have the go-ahead to cross the river and take Philadelphia. So there's Hessians stationed at Bordentown and all throughout Burlington County, and they're basically the backup for Trenton in case something were to happen there. American militia come into Mount Holly, and then they come into upper Burlington County, and they start skirmishing with these other Hessians. Well, these other Hessians are commanded by a guy named Colonel Carl von Donop, who I believe if you paid attention to the Red Bank presentation, you might have remember his name. So Colonel von Donop gets intelligence that there's thousands of American soldiers just over the hillside, and you know what, I think I'm a good match for him. So he takes all of his soldiers, about 2,000 of them, and he marches on Mount Holly. There's only about a couple hundred, 600 at best, American militia in Mount Holly. He drives them off without a fight. Except, when this is all over, von Donop doesn't go back to Bordentown, where he should be, so that he's there in case trouble comes at Trenton. He stays in Mount Holly. His alibi later is, I was trying to get the oath of allegiances from all the citizens. This guy on the left here is Captain Johann Ewald. Now, you want to talk about a Revolutionary War diary worth the money. His diary is better than any other diary, I believe, written during the war from a soldier's perspective. According to Captain Ewald here, in his words, Colonel von Donop was extremely devoted to the fair sex, had found in his quarters the exceedingly beautiful young widow of a doctor. And on the right here is Margaret Morris, a Burlington, New Jersey resident who also, just conveniently for our purposes, kept a diary of December 1776. And in her passage for December 22nd, she mentions all of Mount Holly has been evacuated except a widow of our acquaintance. Well, this widow keeps von Donop in Mount Holly for 3 days, and then when Washington crosses the Delaware and takes Trenton, he's out of position to aid his comrades at Trenton. Captain Ewald, in his diary, which I don't have excerpt here, says that the entire 13 colonies was lost by this escapade, and that Colonel von Donop was kept there and detained by love. His words, not mine. So all I'm saying is, again, wow, 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 but also primary sources. We got this story strictly from these two sources. It's not in the general histories. You're not going to really read. It's a footnote in Fisher's Washington's Crossing book and a couple of the other books, but you really have to go back to the primary sources, which are thankfully available to us, and the story pops right out of the page at you like that. So, again, a story that is overlooked but happened right here in New Jersey that had dire consequences on American history. And that leads to things like this. This was a sign that our local history group did in downtown Mount Holly, and we put her story front and center here and contextualized it. So now, instead, if you don't have access to the sources or you don't have time in your classroom, if you are local or you're venturing through Mount Holly, hey, send your students this way. Look, the story is right here. It's out in the open. And there's an ice cream store right across the street. Do yourself a flavor and get yourself a cone, you know? There you go. Some of my past work with the American Battlefield Trust, I was a content developer for them for 5 years. And one of the projects that I was tasked with doing is my boss at the time, Gary Edelman. I don't know if any of you are familiar with his work with the Battlefield Trust. I like to refer to him as the Bill Nye the Science guy of American history. The guy has more energy than he knows what to do with, in a good way. He came to me one day and said, Adam, I need you to create 80 videos for the American Revolution for the 8th grade curriculum. And I said, well, what topics? And he goes, I don't care. I need 80 of them. So I literally sat down and started typing out what would I want a topic on. And I came up with 80 different topics that covers the whole span, what I think, of the Revolutionary War. And I'm proud to say that these can be found on the Battlefield Trust YouTube page. And as I said, they are strictly for the 8th grade curriculum. They're about 2 to 3 minutes long, so perfect for a short attention span. And they give you the who, what, where, when, and why. And every video ends with the so what, as Gary liked to say. I want the so what at the end, so students walk away with why does this matter. And from these came out, I believe, 4 years ago, and we've gotten nothing but tremendous feedback from them. So I think this is a great utility to implement in the classroom. Again, just even as an icebreaker. So resources are there for you. Ooh, that didn't come out too well. Oh well. Going back to the Lenape for a second and sticking with primary sources here, another interesting way of teaching their history, again with primary source materials, is the Treaty of Crossroads in 1756. I pulled this right up on a quick Google search, and this is available through PDF form. The Treaty of Crossroads in 1756, this was essentially the Lenape's kind of last hurrah, unfortunately, in the state of New Jersey. They had been skirmishing with white settlers in the New Jersey interior, and this was them kind of coming together and trying to figure out a way of ending these skirmishes. Well, they did end after this, but also what the agreement did was it basically forced the Lenape to leave New Jersey permanently. And all of this information is retained in this document right here. But I think it's a good, again, primary source, especially from a European perspective, because you get what their argument and what their side of the story is. And I know some people say, well, we've heard that endlessly throughout American history. Yes and no. Here you actually get the original 18th century context of why they were arguing and doing the things they were doing. And of course, we know the end result is the Lenape were stripped of any, as we learn, while they did not claim ownership of land, this was stripping them of any kind of retention of their historical lands. So, and I love maps, by the way. I do cartography, so I spent a lot of time on the Library of Congress's website, probably too much time. This is a map from 1639 showing Lenapehoking, historically speaking, right when the Swedes first came here, showing kind of New Sweden and its first trip up into the Delaware River Basin. And what's great about this map is you get a first glimpse of some of the Lenape historic villages. And for students, they're looking at historical maps, especially if their geography skills are not great, perhaps using Google Maps, a modern invention that I also use all the time, putting them side by side, and you can see the river systems and how they match up. And then you can kind of eyeball where those villages. And as you can see right there, you can see the huts for the Lenape towns right here. So again, it's a good starting point. I'm not saying that this is the end point by any means, but for students that perhaps are visual learners that tune out when you do exactly what I'm doing right now, perhaps this is a way to tap into their interest level in the subject. And again, more detail here going up the Delaware River, going past Philadelphia there into Burlington County and showing some of the historic villages there. And then comparing it with the map from 1706. Now you have European names applied to the same areas. So you can put them side by side and say, okay, what has changed in only 60, 70 years? And what names on here are still familiar to this day? And this is where a lot of those names originate from around this time period. And then going to the Revolutionary War, we have these maps that are available. The one on the left was done by a British soldier in June of '78 when the British were marching through Burlington County, showing Crossroads, New Jersey. And then on the right, same exact day by a different British soldier, Major John Andre. In his map, of course, we get the actual positions of the British Army while they're bivouacked at Crossroads. And of course, Major Andre was the guy who was eventually hanged for his involvement with Benedict Arnold, for those who don't know. Another thing that I've really become a big advocate for is going through pension applications for soldiers. Now, a quick raise of hands. How many people have access to Ancestry.com? Okay, great. More people than I was expecting. I understand it's ridiculously expensive. I use my wife's aunt's account for that reason because she pays for it. But there are those of us that do have access to Ancestry. Therefore, we have access to the pension applications of Revolutionary War soldiers. And believe it or not, in these pension applications, you get personal stories of the war. I can't guarantee that every soldier is a Shakespeare in waiting, Some of them literally say, I served this day, it was cold, and that's all you get. Other people, they like to be a little bit more dramatic or give you some finesse. And you start really, with some of these guys, you can really get an idea of what they went through. And here's a brief excerpt. I'm not going to read the whole thing. He's talking about fighting here at Assunpink Creek, which is commonly referred to as the Second Battle of Trenton on January 2nd of 1777. And in this, he's talking about how the Hessians were relentless in trying to take the bridge, and how after the battle, the amount of dead bodies were stacked up, and they were just covering the wheat field that was completely decimated. So it gives you a visual element that you're not going to find in a history book unless a historian has pulled this excerpt to create a passage in his story. Another thing, I work in the museum field. I have worked with the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. This is a excerpt document that they just found, and what's great about this is you can see in the wagon up there, those are two women, and they're holding an infant baby. So this was highly irregular for women at the time. They were not allowed to march with Continental soldiers, but through this original sketch from '77, we know that that was not always the case. So, all right, I am running way over time, unfortunately, so. I'm going to end on this. Everything discussed today, have fun. I like to say that because some of this stuff is serious and it can be exhausting. It can also, as I said, take up a lot of your time. And I try to remind myself on a daily basis to take a deep breath and try to find the joys in everything and try to laugh at everything. That's me getting hit with water balloons in grad school. So I think it's a good reminder that while we want to be accurate, we want to dive into serious topics that are uncomfortable and for the right reasons, but we also have to keep our eye on the prize, but also remember to have fun. So, and a list of resources. And that's it. Thank you.